Welcome to the session, folks. Our first Innovators at Work. Hey, everybody. I'm Eddie from Glide, and this is Innovators at Work. We are talking about taking the concepts of innovation and putting them into action for your teams and companies. We're not just staying in the theory. We're actually getting into the tactics, talking about applying those concepts. And today we're talking about knowledge sharing at work. So how do you gather all of that information from around your organization, get it out of the heads of your team members and actually make it useful? And how do you do that effectively? So to have this conversation with us, I am delighted to have William Bill Schonbrun. Did I get the last name right? I've always been concerned about that.
Nailed it, buddy.
Sweet. Thank you. COO at Carbonet. Carbonet helps their customers reduce expenses and emissions by applying chemistry to industrial water treatment. All right. Well, how would you describe it? How would you describe what Carbonet does?
We're out trying to save the world's, we're trying to fix the world's water crisis. Right? I mean, it's just the kind of simple way of doing it. We're using novel and innovative chemistries to try to fix what is the number 6 biggest crisis in the UN's top 25, which is water.
Now, I can only imagine, given what you're doing with Carbonet, what that scale and complexity must be. Can you give us an idea of what it's like? What kind of information are your teams dealing with?
It's huge. Out here in R&D, you're dealing with coming up with formulas. And often the formulas are by testing out thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of different molecular connections. So there's an enormous amount of data out there that they're using. There's a lot of AI and ML tied up in there to figure out what will work best. And then there's the application of that against water. Like, does it work on the water? And so there's a huge amount of data there to go and figure out whether a product is or isn't going to work. And if it is going to work, how and where and why. And you can take it all the way to the other side of the equation, which is like your customers. It's how is it working for the customer? You know, you set an expectation when you go out to work with them. It's going to be cheaper than what you currently use. It's going to work better. It's going to reduce your labor. It's going to do, this, that. It slices, it dices, it juliennes, right? So gathering all of that data out here to understand whether it is fulfilling its promise, and then everything in between. Your employees, how they're working, production, is it, are you producing on the schedule you thought? Is your waste where you thought it would be? Your raw materials, are you getting them for the cost you thought? QA, QC, like you can just go round and around to something as small as expenses and all the way to as big as, dosing. It's parts per million dosing, right? So you think about that, or it's parts per billion, lots of zeros. So there's huge amounts of data that you gather, and without being able to see it or bring it together, you really have no idea how the business is operating.
And when you were coming into Carbonet and seeing the complexity of this and just kind of the vastness, I'm trying to keep up in my head, just imagining what that must look like. What was that first kind of inclination of priority for you when you're dealing with this volume of data and you're coming into lead operations? What's going through your head?
In the early days, it was the belief that you can't fix what you can't measure. And so you don't know what you're doing right and you don't know what you're doing wrong. And when you're early in your journey, as an entrepreneur, when you're early, you often can't answer the question like, where are you a good fit? Who's your target customer? What's your this? What's your that? There's all kinds of things you're trying to answer. And so you sit as a management team and it's like, well, how did we do this quarter? And everybody's got a slightly different response to that, right? And so the first thing was like codifying that. Like, what are the KPIs? What are the target metrics? How do we run the business? How do we measure the business? What matters to us? And so in the early days to us, it was like, well, what matters is how much water are we cleaning, right? What's the number of barrels of water we're cleaning? How much toxic chemical have we taken out of the industry? How much carbon did we take out of the atmosphere? Things like that. So we started looking, saying, okay, that's the first thing that we want to look at. So you begin to build just really simplistic data models, and you use what everybody else uses. Excel, right? It's the world's best BI tool. It's the one that everybody uses. Everybody starts with it. I was in BI for years, and it was like 84% of the world used Excel. And I was like, gee, I wonder why. Well, because it's free. You go by Office and everybody's got access to it. Everybody knows it. Everybody's got it. And it's good. It works for a long time. So the beginning of it was really just building models around revenue at one side, cost. So you understood that stuff, tying that into finance, because that's just the basics of running a business, right? Like we all kind of think money, it's always there. And then the other important metrics, are we fulfilling our mission, right? Like my partner, Barry, the CEO, has always got this question, is the world a better place because Carbonet's in it, right? And it's a really important thing to us. And that doesn't mean, did we drive good revenue this quarter? Did we hit our GM targets? It's, did we pull enough crap out of the world that it's better because we're here? So we're constantly watching those things. So that was where we started. So you kind of start there, and then it's like, okay, what are the legs of those stools? And then you just start to move down those stacks.
And going to Excel, I always joke with my friends, how much of the world runs on Excel and spreadsheets. Yeah. So this mission at the high level, when it comes down to the actual tactical bit of, well, how do we know? How do we know are we doing the thing that we're supposed to be doing? Right. This is all being tracked in spreadsheets. This is all just kicking around in Excel workbooks.
Day one, that's where it started, and where and why and how, and it was just Excel.
Just Excel.
Yeah.
When we were talking before in our pre-show, our prep session, you were talking about you had these disparate systems. So were there a lot of other workbooks kicking around, a lot of other sources of data?
Yeah, finance started in Excel and then went to Xero. The R&D team has tons of different scientific things. The field team, the guys who deliver the product, they have theirs. Slack is heavily used. A lot of our ordering systems are in Slack. WhatsApp is, there's just data everywhere and not a drop to drink, right? There was just data all over the place. And in a lot of cases, not forms that you could easily manipulate and bring together. Mm-hmm. Excel became the simple, ubiquitous platform. But yeah, there is still, to this point, like we're constantly like closing off bits. But when there's nothing, when people don't have things out there, they grab the tools that they're comfortable with and they start to use what they're comfortable with, and they create their own little shadow world.
Right.
And so you go ask them a question, they have an answer. Like, well, where'd you get that answer? So, well, it's, I've got it written on my Game Boy. It's like, well, I don't have access to your Game Boy. I'm like, well, sorry for you. So there's lots of that sits out there.
We hear this a lot at Glide about these disparate systems, and you're going through the process now. When we first spoke earlier in the year, going through that process of trying to bring these systems together, right?
Yeah.
What's that process like? I assume there's a little bit of tension, a little bit of pushback. Why rock the boat? In your case, why go through the trouble of bringing these things together?
I'd say the first answer is you have to. The more practical answer is you have to. You can't grow. You can't scale the business. And this is the kind of thing we sit and we talk about is when we started Carbonate, we were building it. We wanted to build a very large company with not a lot of headcount. So the idea was to be very efficient, and to be efficient, you have to have tools. And the kind of most basic tools when you think about running a business, it's data, it's mining data, it's understanding data, it's surfacing data. So it's these systems, they have to connect, they have to talk. It's easier, frankly, to start a company. Like when we got here, there wasn't a chair, there wasn't a desk, there wasn't a bank account. It's frankly a little easier to start from that than it is to go in, and we've taken over a bunch of companies and like, oh, well, we've been running, this System 34 since 1812, like before electricity was there. And it's like, okay, so we didn't have to break a lot of bad behaviors, a lot of bad habits. So the habits we were breaking, you're like, is this a tough thing to do, and how do you do it? It's not that tough here because people hadn't built it. It was only a couple of years old in their habitual cycle. But when you build an efficient company, it also means that a job that would usually be done by 10 people is being done by one. So that one person, they don't have a free minute to give you. So anything you're going to do to encroach on their time has to add value to them. So a big part of this journey and a big part of getting somebody on board and like, why do you do this? And like, this is a bit of Sisyphus, right? You're pushing a rock up a hill. Yeah. How do you go tell somebody working 80 hours a week, you want them to do more? You can't. You have to tell them, I need you to do less. And you have to explain to them that by doing this, you're actually going to do less. And so we kind of designed everything where we would take the burden, the brunt on our shoulders until it actually was less for them. So we built things in a way where minimal amounts of their time and information, maximal amounts of hours, and then only cuts it across when it's like, is this going to make your life easier? And if their answer is no, then we go back. We keep going back to the drawing board until it is. And that's part of how, like, it's how you kind of get momentum. You get the buy-in, you get it working is making it easier. I think when IT goes at something and it's like, no, we're doing this because like there's a rule and thou shall, like it's like Harry Potter, right? There were like the educational decrees that went up on the wall. Like you can't do it by decree. It has to make their lives easier. Your teams won't follow.
So
that was a big part of the mentality.
Got it. So at the leadership level, you see kind of the end game. Like this is what we need to get into place. But when it comes down to in the weeds, we're talking to the team. How do we get buy-in here? It's really about that reducing friction, and making them feel it. Like, here's the thing that's going to matter to you.
Yeah.
And when you got a million things going on, you're a team of one, that we're asking you to do less is a huge lever, sounds like.
Yeah, we believe very much in an inverted pyramid. Like Barry and I are at the bottom of the pyramid. We're the lowest, like we're the whale slime. We're the bottom. Everything slides at us. So like a lot of companies work the other way. We're like, oh, you're the boss. It's like, no, we're the exact opposite. You know, we're here so you do your job, not the other way around. And we really do live that. So when we were designing this, when we were doing it, it wasn't, do I think it's a good idea? It's, do you think it's a good idea? I don't do your job. Right. And so you really have to walk that walk. And you go out there and it's like, we didn't have a big design doctrine. There wasn't a big design document. There wasn't a big SOP that's like, here's what we're building. It was, I want to go out and do the following. Here's my first cut at it. What do you think? And the team has to be totally empowered to be like, this is crap, right? This won't work for me. And it's like, okay, great. Why not? And they have to feel empowered to tell you why not. And a lot of organizations, you're kind of scared to say to somebody like, oh, this is why it doesn't work. Here, it's like, no, tell me. Like, I can't make your job easier if you don't tell me how. And so the true designers of the technology, of the software, the platform, whatever you want to call it, it's the folks who are out there on the front line. So they have a huge amount of power in how this works. And that inversion in doing that, I think, helps it pick up steam, because they, on a daily basis, I'll get a, hey, could we do the following? And it's like, absolutely, you know, hold my beer. And you go and you do this for them. And as soon as they see that they actually have the power to drive where the value is, they become way more invested. And that I think is a really key thing, is getting your end users invested. It's not an IT-led project. It's not an executive-sponsored project. It's a frontline project. It only works if it works for you, right?
Right. And so do you see yourselves more as, from a leadership level, more as stewards of getting this thing going, but it's really that momentum that's coming from the ground level. The teams are going to be, you're not going to be able to push this ahead without their buy-in. And so
we can't do their jobs. Yeah, we can't do their jobs. If they weren't here and we're not making their lives easier, we don't grow. You can, like, it sounds silly, but like, you can replace an executive, right? There's lots and lots and lots of people who go out there, know how to like run an Excel spreadsheet, right? There's lots of, go get Bob Petito, drop him in my spot. He's going to run, the same or better than it ran, today. But the folks on the front line, the ones that have figured out how to solve the customer problem, they're diamonds, right? Like you have to protect your core asset, and that's the front line. That's the folks out there. Like, think about any experience you have, as simple as like, go to Burger King. Doesn't matter how good the burger is. If the person at the register was a jerk, that was your experience, right? So the front line is your experience as a customer. And we care about three things: the best chemistry, the best team, and the best customer experience. So we hold that one really, really dear. And so those other bits kind of hold together. And if you don't really live that, it falls apart. So that inverted pyramid, that's core ethos to us. It always has been.
Love that. I'm seeing some love for that in the chat as well. I'm going to go back to the name you dropped, Bob Petito. So Bob is one of our Glide experts, builds Glide apps for others, awesome YouTuber as well, tons of courses online. Let's do a little side rail here. Let's talk a little bit about what you built in Glide, to give folks some context about how you're pulling all this information together.
Oh God. So it goes end to end. I mean, it really is an ERP system end to end. Like, truly, that's the start and end of it. Is you can start at your simplest thing, like a business balances supply and demand. So demand, what do your customers want from you? Supply, what can you provide to them? If you're a services company, you're providing hours, accountants, lawyers, whatever. If you're a product company, you're providing products. So the whole system is really around the supply. So what are the materials we buy? Where do we buy them? What are the materials we make? How do we make them? Who makes them? So employees. What's the machines they go on? How much does it cost? So that's inventory. You're making your inventory. And then the other side of the equation is your customers, buying them, watching how much they're using them. So ours is a consumption-based business. So you buy you buy a can of soda. When when that can's getting down low, you're going to replace the can of soda. So everything is really connecting those two worlds, and then understanding all the underpinnings of those bits, right? How fast is he drinking his coffee? When is that coffee going to run out? Did he want more cream? Did he want less cream? Was the sugar good? Was it not good, right? Is it achieving what you want to achieve? So the system is really like top to bottom in its simplest form. It's ERP, right? Enterprise Resource Planning. We just wanted to build one that used the 5% of an ERP system that we actually need without the 95% burden that we didn't need. So the first application that we put out was one for our field team. So our guys and gals who go and visit our customers in the field, how's it working for you? Right? They gather notes, they take pictures, they do all kinds of measurements and stuff when they're out there. First thing was to make their lives really easy while they're on the field, because they'll be wearing, like, it's cold. They're wearing gloves, right? So how do I dictate? How do I take a photograph without doing it? And the back was production. There's something called a batch log, which is a work order. Anybody who's in manufacturing, it's just a work order. And just taking all the work orders and moving it from being paper to moving it to being in a system. So you're kind of connecting the back, like a work order's here. The other end of it is the customer, right? So that's the two sides. So I kind of started at the two sides, and then we're working towards the middle, basically. So it's a lot of that.
Nice. And then Bob was helping with some of that build.
So I reached out to Bob early in my journey, just to be like, so I went, I got certified, I did the whole thing, and I was like, yeah, I'm certified and I'm an idiot compared to this guy. So like, I need to go and make some friends. So I reached out to him. I reached out to Mark at Low Code, reached out to a bunch of different experts, and was like, I just want to know what you know. What's the best way for me to raise my level? Do you want to look at my apps and tear them apart? Like, go tell me, what part I'm doing wrong. Do you want to educate me? Do you want to write some? So Bob and I have created a great relationship. He's a bit of a sounding board, and I send him, I give him access to the apps, and I'm like, what would you have done differently? So he and I work together like that. And he's awesome. I love the guy. He's just amazing.
Love that. You mentioned AI and machine learning when you were introing Carbonet. Where does that fit into the picture here? Are you using AI, or how are you thinking about AI for what you're building?
So we first introduced AI as a fun tool because we wanted to get people comfortable with it. So I actually called the module Your AI Overlord. And the joke of it was, because we wanted to get people who didn't really understand it to be comfortable. So like our company is interesting. It's built from, young PhDs, right? So, 280 IQs, to folks that we have in the field who, it's a totally different skill set. And it's not that one's smarter or less smart, but like truly academic to truly not academic, right? But like great in the field. And you couldn't put these guys here and these guys there. Like, it wouldn't work. But for the guys out here, we did this overlord thing. And the kind of idea was they took notes, right? They're always taking notes. And so we changed it first to be able to dictate. So you take kind of like Glide's very good at having like text to speech, speech to text, and like moving it out there and then summarizing it. And I built a little prompt engineer platform for them. And it'd be like, I want to summarize it. I want 1, 3, 5, 7 bullets. And then I started to do fun things like, what language do you want it in? Right. And so English and Spanish were very common, but I put German, I put French, I put Dutch, I put a bunch of really stupid ones. And then I started to put tone in there. So this is where we started to use AI to be fun, to get folks comfortable what your overlords could do. And it got them kind of hooked. And your tone was internal, external. So like, in inside, like you're going to say anything about the customer. External is like, you got to be nice. And then I did Texan. Right, because a lot of our team's out of Texas, and so Texan, it would convert what they wrote, and it was very funny to come back like, I was out on your site fixing to look at the pump, and y'all, and it was just, and they kind of loved it, and that it broke the ice around AI. Nice. And now they kind of understand that it can do fun things. So now we're beginning to add bits to it where it's like, go back and look at all the information I've had before and give me a suggestion. So the first bits were just breaking the ice, like simplifying AI, humanizing it down to where it's like, yeah, it can be fun, and then showing them where the value is. So that was the first bits. And then in the backside with R&D, we already do a lot of AI and ML. So it's embedding those machine learning models and then taking some of that information from machine learning. And so if you learn that these molecules work well here, it's how do you apply that information out to the front line? And so it's beginning to proliferate that model. So you're almost taking your own LLM and you're moving it out here so that the early data starts to grow with, your real life data and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to it. Like we're in the first inning of this AI, baseball game. It's not entirely clear how to use it long term. There's some great stuff like Copilot's killing it in my mind, the way that Microsoft does it. But it's bringing those kind of things into the business tools. If anybody doesn't use Copilot, like we record all of our company meetings on Teams, and an hour later we get a transcript, it's summarized, and you can ask it questions. We want the same kind of thing in the product. We want to be able to say, hey, what customers are doing well, who's not doing well, why, where's the product working? So getting to that bit.
Nice.
So we have big plans for it, but we're really early in it.
So to kind of zoom out and look at this path from where things started, you have multiple data types, data sources, different teams, things living in spreadsheets. when you got started, you're connecting the dots between these different spreadsheets.
Right.
Now you're bringing these different sources of data together, and you're building a custom ERP, taking the fraction of what you would typically get in an ERP suite, the functionality you need to pull that data together and do useful things with it. So now we have this centralized access to information and knowledge. Now you're extending that with AI to make it useful for your team, and then the different stakeholders. They're going to be interacting with this system. Is that did I have that right?
Yeah, and the last bit to it, Andy, you think about your growth, and when you add new employees, who do you want to train them? Right. So if you have this like huge amount of information in there, and you think about onboarding an employee or onboarding a client, you eventually get to knowledge. So the topic here is knowledge transfer, knowledge management, right? Like AI at its core is around information. It's around knowledge. It's around using that. Kind of making that an advantage. Eventually, I would see us using that as a knowledge management tool, right? AI is gathering the knowledge, it's summarizing the knowledge, it's figuring out what bits to pay attention to, and it's evolving and it's learning over time, which is something we as humans don't do a great job of. We write a document and then we kind of leave it. And then you go to the next document. You don't think a year later, I need to go update that one that I wrote because my hypothesis was wrong. AI is really good at doing that. So eventually when we're onboarding clients, when we're onboarding users, when we're onboarding employees, new scientists, whatever, I think that gives us the foundational platform for raising their level of knowledge at any time. So that whole bit, and it really comes full circle with this idea of knowledge management. Right? That's where I think AI really is going to play a huge role for us.
Yeah, I think you've really hit on kind of the core of what, when we talk about AI and AI in practical use, what we're talking about is knowledge. Now, in our prep call, you also mentioned this impact that you've seen from going from 7 days to 45 minutes in end of month reporting. As one example. Do you want to elaborate on that, or are there other impacts that you're seeing as well that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, for sure. I mean, that was a really kind of a simple one. So we manufacture our product in multiple locations. And so at the end of every month, if you think about how finance works, you have your balance sheet and you have to value your inventory. So how much inventory do you have? And it's a combination of, it's like, how much did you start with? How much did you make or consume? Like, what'd you buy? What'd you sell? What'd you use? And what's left? And then you value what's left. So all of that was being done on pieces of paper. And so imagine multiple locations with multiple pieces of paper. You'd get photographs of these pieces of paper that got dropped into Slack, like piecing that together at the end of a month. And then you go and you check it, like, okay, somebody go walk through the warehouse and be like, it says you have 32 of these, go count. It's like, well, I only see 28. And this happens like every single month. It's like, well, where'd the other 4 go? As soon as you codify that, as soon as you put that into a table, and that was a question from Austin, it's all Glide native tables, Austin. As soon as you put that into a table, now you're watching it in real time. So we know at any given time what's happening. So the end of the month used to be the operations team and the finance team got together. We went through all the photos, all the documents, all the everything, all the sales, all this. And it was like, okay, how much do you think we have? Okay, how much do you think we have? Yeah, those numbers don't match. Let's go find out why. And we spent days and days and days just unraveling and unraveling and unraveling. And in the end, it was like, what's everybody comfortable with? Like, what's your best guess? Because you like things get forgotten. Oh, that one spilled. Don't you remember that day that there was the hurricane and the cow tipped it over? Like you forget. When you have the data, that was a true story actually. When you have the data sitting there, you can literally just look, and at the end of the month, it says we have 7. I'm going to gut check this. You go down to the warehouse, they start up FaceTime, they walk around you, up there's the 7, everybody good, check, and you move on. And that number moves across to 0 as the value. So that was the 7 days down to 45 minutes. Frankly, it's less than 45. It's only 45 because we're like, get to trusting the info. Eventually it'll be 1 minute. Like the info's right and you just push it across. That was that bit of the journey.
Gotcha. I think that kind of following up on the AI note about what's the actual practical application here. Knowledge management for the sake of knowledge management isn't useful, but when it's knowledge management for the sake of something like this, where it's reporting, tracking, being able to go back and validate assumptions or just double checking things.
Yeah,
that's where the value comes through.
It's the internal value. Think of the external value though. So let's say we as a species are united that solving the world's water crisis is important to us all. Well, if certain customers are figuring things out, and you can redact the data, but people have figured out how to do this. But you eventually can surface this information out and say, if you want clean water, do A, B, and C. And here's all the underpinnings of how and why. So you're now starting to gather huge amounts of data. So you could open source that, right, as one of the ideas. But information is what drives this all forward. It doesn't have to be the formula. So often it's the, what are you doing? And then there's the how are you doing it? So this is the how part. Putting the how out there to help people understand, like in this region of the world, for this type of water to remove this constituent, whether it's dirt or iron or whatever that's constituent, here's what you do, here's what worked. Surfacing that as AI, if you eventually put that out there, you provide that knowledge, and the old knowledge is power, information is power. Why should everybody have to start this journey from zero and learn? You have to stand on the shoulders of those who did it before you in something like this, where we don't look at this as it being competitive, right? Like this isn't a zero-sum game. Like we all win or we all lose. If the world runs out of water, we all lose. So if we can use this information as a way of providing it so others can get on, and you're accelerating your timeline, right? Like the first voyage took them 5 years to figure it out, and then it becomes this and this and this. Eventually it should take you 5 minutes because all of the how is there. AI, I think really powers that. That's to me that's the long game in AI for something like this.
It's like a compounding interest of knowledge.
It really, really, really is. It is. It totally is.
Sticking with that, the external application of capturing knowledge and sharing that knowledge. Another nugget I loved that you dropped in our pre-chat: equipping yourself with data for negotiations and decision making. That's just stuck in my head since we last spoke. Can you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, the mission we call weaponizing data. And weaponizing is fun. Like you think of that as a military term, as a bad term. It isn't necessarily weaponizing. It means giving it, power, importance, right? Strength. We started with, you can't fix what you can't measure. So customer comes back and they're like, the price, the product isn't doing A, B, and C, and the price needs to be, blah. If you don't have good information, there's really no way to have an intelligent conversation. So because we have such good data, when our clients come to us, and it happens often, and you think about it, like you get the folks in the ivory tower and then the folks who are doing the real work. So the folks in the ivory tower call you up and they're like, your product's doing blah. And it's like, actually, here's what's going on. And because you can back that up with huge amounts of information, you can help educate them to things that they're not able to see. We often have better data than our customers will have. And so we're able to show them, be like, hey, here's what we see, here's why, here's how we're doing it, here's why we priced it. So that becomes a very important thing. So it's really shifting from opinion to like truth and backing that up with the data. So when we talk about weaponizing data, it's often gathering so much that when we state an opinion, it's really more fact-based and you can back that up. And so we try to do that everywhere, right? So when we get into these meetings and someone says, oh, this molecule worked better, it's like, okay, let's go look at the data, right? Like it's constantly, so Barry, my partner, worked at Bain & Company, and the saying there was, in God we trust, but show me the data. And we very much kind of hold on to that. And it's a truthful thing. It's not negative religion. It's just kind of the joke that like everything is really about the data. And so everything we do, it starts and ends with the data, right? Opinion goes on the side when you have good data. And that's kind of what we mean by it.
Love that. There have been a lot of great insights in our conversation so far, but I want to be explicit with this next question.
Yeah.
You've been through this process so far with Carbonet, a lot of experience dealing with other companies. What advice do you have for others who are trying to get started with this? Maybe they're a startup, maybe they've been established for a while, but they're in that situation you were talking about. There's information everywhere. What advice do you have for them for improving knowledge sharing within their teams?
Start small, right? My first one, we start small, right? Often people get stuck in analysis paralysis because they try to bake and they want to boil the ocean. They want to think about everything all at once, and it's just not feasible to do, a big company or small company. I would say think agile, right? Start, dive in, get in there, do it. Don't spend your life planning, actually get in. You won't really know what's wrong or right until you start it. So just dive in with both feet. Like, don't be afraid, just kind of go at it. I would pick users and problems that are high value, things that when you solve, they're going to create momentum, right? So don't go fix a problem that's kind of like really simple, right? Like finance has all the tools they need. They'll be the last ones that I go and try to do anything for. But take the group, and it's not a knock to them, but like there's a gazillion finance tools out there, right? So but there's no field service tools that we need, and there wasn't a production tool. So go and find folks who are, they might not know that they're clamoring for it, but you kind of see the pain they're going through and you know that you can help them. So to me, it's really that simplistic. Just start. Don't wait. Don't worry about failing. And like the old joke, and there's old jokes like, fail fast, fail often. Mine, the one I always love is like, the joke with Abraham Lincoln, he failed 20 times before he succeeded. And I always love, the Mrs. Lincoln line. Well, besides that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the show? Like, just get in there and try and don't worry about what might go wrong. That can all be solved. People spend too much time sitting on the sidelines trying to plan it out and game it and wonder. And then eventually they give up because it's like, I got my day job. Just get in there. It's funny. Glide became my happy place. I joke around the company with this. Like I have all these other bits, but it became the thing I did on weekends and nights because I ended up enjoying doing it so much. Once you dive in and you start to deliver this value, and you go for the small wins. That's the other one, is go for the quick small wins so you can build that momentum, right? You kind of build it up. So it's things like that I would say as a starter. It's small little wins, and then you just build upon that.
Next question here from Seppi. Did you face any challenges in getting your systems adopted? So the new Glide apps that you're building, and if so, how did you overcome that?
The only real challenge that we got in the batch app, in the work the kind of work orders, for a while we went parallel. So they were still writing it on paper, and then they were also putting it in the app. And a couple of weeks in, I was like, all right, guys, it's time to ditch the paper. And everyone was like, no, we have to keep the safety net. Like, don't do that to us. And I was like, all right, you get one more week. And eventually it was like, I'm taking it out. Like, we're taking it out from under your feet. You have to be able to fly without a net. So it wasn't so much a pushback as it was a bit of a fear of, I'm so used to blah. I'm so scared to give that up. So eventually we pulled the rug out from under them on that, and something went wrong, and we showed like how we could backtrace and find it. And they were like, the first time they saw it, they were like, oh, okay, so I have the bit that I need. And most of that fear, frankly, was just people are afraid for their job. What happens if I make a mistake, right? And so when you're here and you're flying without a net, so we're also very strong. Like, no one at CarbNet's ever been fired, censured, in trouble for making a mistake. Like, we don't do that. So giving your users the comfort that it's okay to make a mistake. We got your back. It's been designed for it. Once they kind of realize that that's the reality, they stop worrying, right? Like when it's fear or they're holding on to something, if you can get to the root of it, you can often break the back of it. And that's really all it was, is they were afraid they would get in trouble.
I think that's such an important call out around culture. If one of the things holding folks back from innovation and adoption of a new tech or new ways of doing things, the fear of what if, all these what if scenarios that run through your head, right? But if you have that culture of don't worry, we're in this together, we're going to figure it out together, right? It's almost like that's a prerequisite for doing anything around innovation in order to counter that fear.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, culturally, we talk a lot as a management team and with the team that the only thing that really makes you a not fit at CarbonNet is not fitting the culture. We can deal with almost anything else. So again, it's an ethos of the company. And, when you have that and when people believe it, and here they like our team, like we're 50 now, like everyone really understands what that means. When you bring a new player into this company, folks know whether they're going to make it really quick. Right. It's like they reject someone like a bad organ transplant if they're not going to be a good fit, and they embrace them quickly if they will. And you can tell really fast. And so if you can stay true to that as you kind of grow your company, that's often where companies kind of fall apart, as you get to this middle management layer where it's like, well, I don't actually believe that and I'm going to do my own thing. And then it kind of like falls apart. We stayed really true to this. And when you have that kind of trust within your teams and you can take away don't worry about it, it's okay. Then people are willing to take risks. And often the greatest innovations come from that willingness to take a risk. I can tell you from the product side, we did kind of the Google thing. 20% of your time can be spent doing what you want, right? And one of the products that's coming out in the future, which I can't mention yet, but one that we're most excited about, was literally one of our guys saying, I really don't want to work on the current products. They don't excite me. And that's going, well, fine. What does excite you? We trust you to go spend your time on that. And his name's Chris, came out with something that's just incredible. So people having that trust, knowing that they can fail and it's okay, and that you've got their back. And there's a huge cultural part. If you want to drive innovation or be cutting edge or forward, like if you really want to lead the charge in places, people have to believe that you've really got them.
And I think that's a great point to leave off on. Bill, thank you so much for the time today. So many great insights, so many little nuggets that I can't wait to pull out. For everybody else, you're still in the chat, tuning in on demand. Thank you so much. If you have more questions, more thoughts, let's keep the conversation going in the Glide community. And don't forget to subscribe for more sessions like this. We got a bunch lined up. Go over to glideapps.com/events, sign up there. And you can also see all of the events that we've hosted over the past year. You'll also find links in the description down below on this page or on the YouTube video, wherever you're watching this. Thanks again, Bill. And thank you to the Carbonet team for letting us borrow Bill.
Thank you, my friend.
Have a great rest of the day. Same to everybody watching. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. See you all in the community. Take care, guys. Thanks, Andy.
Cheers.